Hello friends, welcome to Salvaged by K. Scott. I am Katie and today I'm going to be showing you how I deconstructed this totally trashed Art Deco vanity and recycled it and restyled it into a pair of tall, narrow nightstands that can fit into the modern vintage and dark and moody design trends that are so hot for 2023. I picked this thing up at my local Habitat for Humanity restore for $50 a few weeks ago, and since it's in such awful condition already and not too many people are making use of vanity tables like this anymore, I thought this would be the perfect piece for this type of upcycling project. I love the beautiful curves on these Art Deco waterfall style pieces. The veneer on the drawers is stunning, although it's a little hidden under this grimy old finish. The handles are beautiful solid brass, and the massive round mirror on this is going to be a great statement piece to hang on the wall all on its own, but that's going to be a project for another day, so I'm definitely going to hang on to it. Let's start pulling this thing apart. I've done a few of these here on the channel over the years, and the one thing that I've learned is that they are all assembled a little bit differently. So my best advice for breaking something down like this is just to follow the nails and screws around, undo things a little bit at a time, and see how everything is held together. There used to be a mirrored shelf that sat on these brackets. They've each got a little screw and a nail holding them in place. So once I removed the screws, I just grabbed them with my pliers and pulled out the nails as well. After taking a look at the back, I decided that I needed to remove the backer boards to get access to the large board that's basically holding everything together. And I just used the claw of my hammer and a flathead screwdriver to pry those off. They were pretty gross, and I ended up cutting some new ones later on. This board was held on with a few nails, and then it was sitting in this slot. I thought the easiest way to get this out was going to be to cut it in half so I could get a little bit of leverage and pull the nails out. So I grabbed my circular saw and made one cut right through it. I was able to get in behind one side to pry those nails out, but the other side just wasn't cooperating. So next I found the screws on the inside of each drawer tower that were holding the center shelf in place, and I undid those. I was expecting to have a little wood glue or hidden nails to deal with in there, but as soon as I had the last screw out, everything just fell right apart, nice and clean. I flipped them over and pulled out the old casters. They were super crusty. They only had 3 on each table, and I just don't think they're necessary now for nightstands, so I wasn't worried about replacing them. Here are my 2 separate nightstands. I am going to need to fill in where the shelf sat and also fill in the gap on the back where they were connected together. But before I start on that, I wanted to try and tackle the wrecked veneer on the tops. I grabbed a scraper and worked off whatever was already loose, and then I noticed this nice fresh split down the back leg on one of the units. This was definitely my own handiwork from smashing on this. So I put some wood glue on the inside of that, clamped everything back in place, and left it to dry overnight. The next morning I was ready to really have at it with the rest of the veneer on these tops. I soaked an old towel in some hot water and then plugged in my garage iron. While that was warming up, I busted out some varnish stripper so that I could start working on the old finish on the drawer fronts at the same time. This veneer is really thin and I don't want to accidentally sand through it by trying to sand off the old finish, so I'm going to use this chemical stripper instead. Smart Strip is water-based, low VOC, and much more eco-friendly than a lot of other chemical strippers on the market, but you do still want to wear gloves, eye protection, and a respirator while you're using it. Basically, you just glob on a really thick coating and let it sit anywhere between 3 and 24 hours to do its thing. It does say it's formulated to stay wet on its own, but I found that it works a little bit better if it's covered with some plastic just to keep it from drying out. By the time I had the drawers all tucked in, my iron was nice and hot, and I went back to steaming off the rest of the veneer. I just worked section by section, letting the iron warm up and melt the glue that's holding it on, and then used my scraper to peel up that wood. While I was working away at that, I asked Doug if he could help me cut down a piece of wood from another project. I think this was actually a mirror support on another dresser, but I wanted to fit that into the big gaps on the backs of these nightstands. So he cut that to length on the miter saw and then shaved a tiny bit of the width off on the table saw to get as close of a fit as we could, and then used some glue and a few screws to attach them. And I also had him cut me the new backer boards while he had the saws out. It ended up taking me about 2 hours to get all of the veneer off of these tabletops, and then I was more than ready to move on to making the rest of these repairs. Since I didn't clean anything before I started my demolition, I gave the stands a really good scrub down with some Simple Green to remove any surface grime and especially old furniture polish residue that I don't want to grind down into the surface when I'm sanding. And then I mixed up some Bondo to fill in the tracks from the shelf. Bondo is a 2-part epoxy, so you need to mix the base putty with a separate cream hardener to create a chemical reaction that solidifies it. And it tends to start setting up pretty quickly once it's mixed, so I like to work it in smaller batches, especially when I'm filling in something big and deep like this. I also used it to fill in the seam between the frame and the new piece of wood that we added and the little screw holes from where the shelf brackets were removed. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get a good fill in one shot on these really deep spots, so after my first pass had dried, I sanded away the excess and then mixed up some more Bondo to fill in the trough and get it perfectly flush. While that was setting up, I took a look at the drawer fronts again. It looked like the stripper had done its thing at this point, so I peeled up the plastic and carefully scraped up all the gunk. Once I had most of the finish off, I used some 4/0 steel wool to scrub off the rest, and then wiped everything down with some water and set those aside to dry. After smoothing out my second round of filler, I went on and scuff sanded the other sides of both units. While I was working on that, I noticed that there were a few spots where the sub veneer on the tops was starting to lift. Again, I've created my own problem here, and this is a result of all of the steam that I used to get the top layer of veneer off, but this is an easy fix. I just pushed a little bit of wood glue under those spots with a syringe and a box cutter and then clamped them up to dry. I sanded the tops as smooth as I could, but because this is a rougher substrate that was never meant to be seen, it needed some more filler to get it smooth enough for paint. I used some of Bondo's spot glaze on an old gift card to smear on a really thin layer over this and just kind of fill in the deeper wood grain areas. Drywall spackle is another great thing for this kind of shallow filling. It's never going to be perfect, but it definitely made it better, and it's going to give it a more professional look. While that dried, I got started on hand sanding the rest of the wood details on the fronts of these. Luckily, the old lacquered finish was really flaky to start with, so it came off exceptionally easy with some 120 grit sandpaper. I also went over all of the drawer fronts really lightly with some 180 grit to smooth them out once they were fully dry. And then the last bit of sanding was just to smooth out the tops. And then I cleaned up all of my dust with a microfiber cloth and started masking off the front parts of these nightstands that I wanted to keep wood. I laid out a drop cloth and then propped up the tables on my painter's pyramid. Then I loaded up my gravity-fed HVLP pneumatic spray gun with some of this Luxe Chocolate Brown color by Fusion Mineral Paint. I've never used this color on its own before, but I think it's going to be the perfect fit for these. It's really dark, but it should give me a much warmer feel than a straight up black. I did decide to skip primer on these, and my reasoning for that was because I was using a dark color. So although I could technically still get some wood tan and bleed through, it's highly unlikely. And also because Fusion is an acrylic resin paint with a built-in top coat, that should lay nicely across the wood and the wood filler. And after a few coats, camouflage the difference in texture there pretty well. It could have been a huge mistake. I may have needed to go back and prime and repaint, but I was willing to trust the paint on this one. My first coat of paint dried really nicely. I could still see the repairs very slightly through it, but since they were all sealed now with that first coat of paint, my next coats should hide that completely. There was a little more texture on the tops than I was really happy with, so I did another thin layer of my spot glaze, left that to dry, came back and sanded it smooth again, and then sprayed on another 2 light coats to get full chocolatey coverage. When all my paint was nice and dry, I pulled off the masking, and I knew I was going to need to make the lighter wood on the front frame match the darker, redder veneered sections a little bit better. So I grabbed some of this water-based wood stain by Behr in the color English Chestnut. It's got a really strong red tone, and I painted that over the lighter bits of wood with a foam brush and then immediately wiped up the excess. Hopefully by now the design idea in my head is starting to come together in a way that it makes sense to you. But now that I had all of the wood in a closer match to each other, I decided to stain everything, the frame and the drawers, in this water-based stain in the color Walnut. And while that dried, I brought the pulls inside and soaked them in a mixture of vinegar and hot water to start cutting through the grime on them. And then I scrubbed everything clean with some more of my steel wool and a little bit of Barkeeper's Friend. These are solid brass and polished up so nicely. To seal and protect all of the surfaces, I decided on this finishing oil from Fusion. This is the natural or uncolored color, but they also have a few other shades that you can use to stain and finish all in one step. But it's a blend of tung oil, linseed oil, vegetable wax, and a solvent that actually soaks into the surface and becomes part of it. It creates a super strong, durable coating that's resistant to scratches, it's fully washable, and it's even rated for floors and tabletops. You can use it over paints, but it will amber or yellow a little bit, so it's not something to use over lighter colors. It's going to be fine over this chocolate brown though. Again, very easy to use. You brush it on, let it soak into the surface for 15 or 20 minutes, and then wipe away the excess. You can apply multiple coats to build up more of a sheen if you want, but I'm just going to do one on here. This oil does need 9 hours to dry and then takes about a week to 10 days to fully cure. So the next morning I used a few little finishing nails to attach my fresh backer pieces and reinstalled my shined up handles. And here we have it. A totally wrecked and unusable vintage vanity turned into an incredible pair of nightstands that can easily fit into today's design styles and be functional pieces of furniture again. These are going right back to the restore, and hopefully they can make a little bit more than $50 on them this time. Please make sure that you are subscribed for tons more furniture makeover inspiration, and let me know what you'd like to see me work on coming up. I'm always looking for new ideas. Thank you so much for hanging out with me through this project today. I very much appreciate you, and I will catch you all next time.